Yeah, I hope all the speakers are fine with recording it. We will be uploading on our YouTube channel also.
Yeah, I give my consent.
Yes, me too. Hi, Nina,
you.
nice to see you.
Yeah, very nice to be together again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Preeti.
Hi, Leena. Hello, Dr. Dar.
Hi, hi.
Hi,
Nice to see
Anjali.
you.
Maybe we'll start in a couple of minutes. More people are joining.
Nice to see all the familiar faces once again, yeah.
So maybe we can begin. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, which has been organized by the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, People's Vaccine Alliance India, and the Campaign for Access to Medicines, Diagnostics and Devices India. As you all know, you can see by the topic, we are talking today about the leaked TRIPS waiver text, and we want to see if that is a loss to India. So just to give a very brief introduction, we all know, this audience knows it really well, that over the last 2 years, the pandemic has come to be defined by inequity and injustice. And that can be seen across all the fields, but obviously a lot in health and healthcare, and the way we have completely, I mean, people have faced severe lack of access to the existing vaccines and medicines and diagnostics. And there has been an artificial scarcity of these things because we have not been able to scale up what already exists. And though there have been many, as they say, scientific discoveries in the last 2 years, certain things that were not seen before. So one of when the global health governance leaders told us early in the pandemic that they will create mechanisms like COVAX or ACT Accelerator, and all of that is going to ensure that people have access to the essential medical tools to fight COVID-19, then itself we knew that that is not going to help. And therefore, when India and South Africa in October 2020, they proposed at the World Trade Organization the TRIPS waiver text, the civil society came together and started to advocate that that waiver should come through as soon as possible. Today, now we see it has been 18 months, and the waiver is still has not yet taken place. The TRIPS is still there, and that is what is governing the trade of COVID-19 medical tools. But we also realized that towards the end of last year, negotiations have started to move. But recently, there has been a leaked text that it was leaked to the media and allegedly by a group of 4 countries, which includes India and South Africa, US and EU. But we are saying allegedly, very consciously, this thing. It has been leaked and said that they're proposing. So the text basically proposes, it's a counter proposal to TRIPS and has some very, very problematic provisions. So it is in this context that we are organizing this webinar. Why is TRIPS important? What does this leaked text mean? What are the problems with it? How are we taking it? How are the people in Geneva reacting to this text, and what as civil society can we do about it? So to start the webinar, I invite our first speaker, Leena Menghani. She is not new to this audience. She is the head of South Asia for MSF Access Campaign and an expert on IP. So she will be taking us through what is TRIPS waiver, its importance, and what is the problem with the leaked text. Yeah, Leena.
Yeah. So I'm representing Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. Médecins Sans Frontières, as many of you know, is a treatment provider in areas of conflict, of areas of exclusion, populations of exclusion, and of course, natural disasters and other emergencies. So it's from that perspective that we're looking at the pandemic, and from that perspective, you're looking at some of the solutions that are being presented to member states. So it's important to sort of understand that a large part of how medicines are priced or available or accessed or in supply is determined by the kind of rules that the World Trade Organization has set for member countries. And that's had a huge impact on the ability of countries to manufacture life-saving medicines and to trade in legitimate generic medicines, for example, or to increase manufacture or scale up life-saving vaccines. So that's the backdrop that I'm talking about, the World Trade Organization, its intellectual property rules, its huge impact on the kind of pricing, supply, access of life-saving treatments, vaccines, and other essential medical products. And within the pandemic, sort of to highlight that recognizing that the World Trade Organization and its rules have such a huge impact in this area of COVID-19 medical supplies, India and South Africa made a proposal almost 2 years ago, asking for the waiver of monopolies, essentially intellectual property barriers, and asked for it to be covering all medical products. And that essentially sort of set the ball rolling on negotiations and discussions and debates the world over on the kind of barriers that countries have faced in the supply of these very important tools for the public health response. So I am essentially going to look at 2 aspects of this whole debate, or 3 aspects of this whole debate. Firstly, I would like to highlight that the leaked text is nowhere near the proposal that India and South Africa have originally made. So this is not a meaningful solution. This is not even a counter proposal. I would just simply say that it's a direct attempt to dilute the groundbreaking proposal that India and South Africa made and was supported by 100 countries. And why does it not work? And I think these are 3 key reasons. If you look at the kind of intellectual property it seeks to waive, it's limited to patents. We all know that in the area of biological medicines, in the area of vaccines, access to drug dossier, the data contained within them, confidential information, trade secrets is absolutely the key to speeden up the manufacture of biological medicines and vaccines that have been used in the pandemic. Now, this is only one form of IP in the leaked text. It's only patents. So you're looking at a situation where you have intellectual property covered, you have vaccines covered, but then that's very specific and limited to just patent barriers. When we know that for vaccines, we need to do more about data monopolies, increase in transparency at the regulator, and so on. So that's one very key important issue. One of the reasons why trade secrets and confidential information have been sort of left out of the negotiations is, if you look at the kind of pressure India has been facing from the US on formulating a specific trade secret law that would suit its own pharmaceutical corporations. So this is not by omission. This is absolutely deliberate. So that's one. We also know that the exclusion of trade secrets, the exclusion of Article 39, or the lack of inclusion of Article 39 overall comprehensively that deals with confidential information, also sort of stunts the vaccine hub, the mRNA hub that WHO and South Africa governments have set up, because it's the long route to manufacturing the mRNA vaccine. So you have that one problem, which is a key reason that we need to be really worried about. The second key reason that I wanted to sort of highlight is this, why does this solution not work, for example, India or the countries that are dependent on India for supply? And that's where, the US position on exclusion of therapeutics comes into play, and diagnostics comes into play. The exclusion of therapeutics and exclusion of diagnostics from the leak text is a deliberate ploy to sort of delay generic supplies to the rest of the world. Now, if you look at India itself, it produces a number of COVID therapies. If you look at one of the drug, baricitinib, it's patented in India. It's available under a voluntary license that Eli Lilly signed with Indian generic manufacturers, but not a single pill can be exported because of patent barriers and the voluntary license exclusions. So, MSF itself has been seeking to source from Indian companies, and the response is, well, we can't export the drug. So at this point of time, when we are seeking to increase access to therapeutics, when majority of the therapeutics are today dominated by procurement in high-income countries or too highly priced, you have a situation where that solution is not even on the table. So the second reason I would say this is nowhere near the solution that India and South Africa proposed is the exclusion of therapeutics and the exclusion of diagnostics. And people can look into the kind of monopolies that existed on reagents, for example, and the processes of making reagents to read more of why we are talking about diagnostics as well. So that's a second key reason. Number three is, I think, this is originally the EU's original proposal that we'll make some concessions on compulsory licensing. I'm not saying that concessions on compulsory licensing are not important. They are very important. Civil society itself has been fighting to reform the compulsory licensing mechanism for import and export. India has never been able to export under a compulsory license, since the time it amended its patent law and became part of the TRIPS regime. So it's clearly something that all of us are looking for. But the concessions made on compulsory license for export, for example, have limitations. They have requirements. And lastly, if there are concessions to be made on compulsory licensing, why should they be restricted to vaccines only, for COVID vaccines only? But more importantly, this is a clarification of the TRIPS agreement and sort of an extension of the Doha Declaration. Why should we restrict it to COVID-19 at all? Why should we not have the same kind of concessions made on compulsory licensing for all therapeutic areas? And I think this is a mistake that member countries would make if they were to accept this text without looking into the long-term impact this leak text would have, and most importantly, not working towards standing up to the leak test, because it definitely doesn't work for the pandemic, but it doesn't work for us in the long-term agenda of what I would say is making TRIPS work for access to medicines and increasing our responses to public health. So I think from the three key reasons I've listed, that it's for specific forms of intellectual property, in particular highlighting that monopolies on data, trade secret have been left untouched. And that is very problematic in the area of vaccines and biological medicines. Highlighting again, very clearly that we can't have a solution piecemeal where we look at vaccine access and we don't look at access to therapeutics now, wherein in our experience, the waves have come and ebbed, and patients have needed drugs for severe disease, mild and moderate disease. And lastly, I would like to highlight that concessions on compulsory licenses have to be made across the board for all diseases, because as we all know that compulsory licenses are important not just for COVID-19, but they are important, and they're not restricted to emergencies, but they are very important for all therapeutic areas, diseases, public health programs. So I'm going to stop here and leave it to the next speaker to cover this area, very important area. Thank you.
Thank you, Leena. And yeah, thanks for giving that perspective. And obviously, MSF, coming from the fact that it's a treatment provider, we can understand how important it is for to hear that perspective. So next, I would like to request Dr. Biswajit Dhar to speak. Dr. Dhar is a professor of economics in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And Dr. Dhar will take us through the text and TRIPS waiver in more details. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jyotsna. And at the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts. I think it's an extremely important moment in our fight for justice on the access issue, because for the last since the last 2 years, we have been actually back fighting against this extremely iniquitous situation that we've been facing on the vaccine front, and it's the same kind of a problem is likely to continue when we have the medicines for COVID whenever they come. Now, I'll just begin by giving you some numbers as to how iniquitous the situation is on vaccine availability. And just taking down some numbers, the latest numbers as of today, it says that less than 2/3 of the world's population have at least one dose of vaccine, and 14.5% of the people in low-income countries have received at least one dose of vaccine. So that is the situation that we are looking at, and we all are well aware of the situation that we can't see the back of COVID until every single person living on this earth is vaccinated. And of course, the other issue is that we don't know how long the vaccines that we took last year was going to last, and we would actually need some booster doses as well. So we are looking at a huge amount of sort of slack that is there between what is available, and of course there is the question of affordability also comes in at the same time, and what the need is. And therefore, when India and South Africa made the proposal in October 2020, the whole the perspective was that the vaccines and medicines for combating COVID should be available widely. It should actually be available to anyone who's wanting to, any country who wants to produce these medicines, and so that this problem can be countered in the shortest possible time. Now, Leena gave a very good perspective on what the waiver proposal was, and where are we today when the leaked text is before us. Now, let me also say that what the waiver proposal intended to do was to take a step, a major step forward from what we had achieved in Doha when the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and Public Health was adopted. Now, the Doha Declaration clearly gave us the freedom to use compulsory licenses, and also determine the grounds on which the compulsory licenses can be granted. So it was fairly clear to us that as far as the compulsory licenses issue is concerned, we had actually made a big stride forward. Of course, there were issues regarding export of products that were being produced under compulsory licensing, and this whole the so-called Para 6 solution had to be found. And of course, we know for certain now that the Para 6 solution is a non-starter. The complexities that there are, the rules are so convoluted that it's very difficult for anyone to really export using the compulsory licensing provisions, whatever was agreed in Article 31 base. So all of us welcome the India-South Africa move precisely because this move was intended to free us from all kinds of encumbrances regarding the patents, but also what Lina was mentioning, many other forms of intellectual property rights, including, of course, very importantly, trade secrets. And the trade secrets issue was important also because what we had seen in the run-up to the production of all the vaccines that we have now, that there was a great deal of secrecy as far as availability of data on clinical trials and other efficacy was concerned. And the companies were deliberately keeping all this data away from scrutiny, away from public domain, and that had to be countered. So we had a proposal which said that not only would all these different forms of intellectual property rights, from patent, copyright, industrial designs, and trade secrets be free from all encumbrances of IP protection, on all the sections of the TRIPS agreement would not apply. The proposal, a subsequent amendment of the proposal also said that not only would we like to have a complete waiver, but we would also from all the enforcement and implementation of the TRIPS agreement in these areas. We would also like to see that the methods and means of manufacture for prevention, treatment, or containment of COVID-19 are also made available. So many of you who work on this area of IP would know that typically in an IP sort of in a patent law, the patent holder is not required mandatorily to disclose the methods and means of manufacture, which is extremely important. If you have to get access to the technology, if you have to use the technology for domestic or for production anywhere, without the consent of the rights holder, then you need access to this information regarding methods and means of production of manufacture. So we had a document, we had a proposal in the WTO, which is now being backed by 63 more countries, 63 more members of the WTO, and it's an extremely robust proposal. This is the only one we think which will be able to solve this problem of access that I mentioned earlier. The whole inequity can be addressed only by implementing the waiver proposal that was on the table. Now this leaked text comes and tells us that what is being supposed to have been agreed. Right? We are not still clear whether there is a complete agreement among all the four parties that have been mentioned by the European Union in the leaked text: India, South Africa, EU, and US. But we are told that there is an agreement that the way forward is going to be a compulsory licensing system, basically. Yeah, and a compulsory licensing system which is not clear if it is as broadly defined or as the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and Public Health, which I just mentioned earlier, gave us complete freedom to decide when we are going to be invoking the compulsory licensing provisions. So it was really up to the governments to invoke those provisions. Of course, one might argue that the compulsory licensing system, despite having got a kind of a blank check after the Doha Declaration, it hasn't been used, except once in India. It's been rarely used in different countries. So here we have a proposal for, so quote unquote, moving forward, which actually defeats the purpose, in my view, of the Doha Declaration itself. The more important aspect is that it talks about a certain a set of eligible countries who can actually access this so-called solution, and the eligible countries are all developing countries. So one important aspect that I would like to mention here is that our neighbor, Bangladesh, which has a growing pharmaceutical industry and is doing fairly well in terms of providing access to medicines to its people, and it's also can grow to a formidable strength in the coming years. Bangladesh, as a least developed country, Bangladesh is still a least developed country, is in the process of transition from a least developed country to a developing country, but it currently is still a least developed country. So Bangladesh is not going to be eligible country. So Bangladesh is left out. So the question that all of us actually are asking is that what was the urgency for the government of India to be part of this, or to be part of this so-called quote unquote solution to the COVID problem? For one, as Lina was mentioning, this only talks about vaccines. There has to be a separate decision for therapeutics. It doesn't talk about all the other diagnostics and other COVID-related products that was included in the waiver proposal. It's vague about the applicability of compulsory licensing or application of the compulsory licensing system. And of course, we don't know for sure whether a technology transfer is going to take place. Let me also mention here, I was actually going through some of the texts that European Union has produced on the compulsory licensing system. And in several places, they mention very clearly that compulsory licensing system does not ensure technology transfer. And many of us know this, that technology transfer has its limitations. Unless a government really exercises its influence, technology transfer would not take place. So the question is that when the entire effort that was being made, or by all of us, and the civil society was making a huge pitch to ensure that vaccines and medicines and all other COVID-related products reach those who need them most in a expeditious manner. So when all these efforts were made, what was the reason why for us, for India to be part of this so-called non-solution, I would say? So I think we need to really point out all the problems that there would be, and going forward, so that and I think this issue should be discussed in the public domain as much as we can. So that the government is pointed in, we all point all the problems out very clearly to the government of India, so that the government disassociates itself from this so-called non-solution as soon as possible. So I would stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhar. And yeah, I think it was very useful to hear why other forms of IP barrier removing that is equally important, because we constantly hear about patents so much. And to realize that compulsory licensing will not ensure technology transfer on its own and automatically is something like we need to keep in mind, and to know about the other forms of IP barriers. Yeah. So next, I would like to invite Preeti Patnaik. She is the founder and editor of Geneva Health Files. And during the pandemic, I think that is the website we all go to know what is happening in Geneva and how is the global health governance helping or not helping in containing the pandemic. So Preeti, would you like to tell us about how the leaked text has been received in Geneva and some of the reactions, actions? Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for the invite. My pleasure to be here. Just taking off from what Dr. Dhar has pointed out, why was India a part of the solution? Just taking a step back. So after the ministerial conference of the WTO was cancelled in December, there was pressure on the DG of the WTO to deliver. So it's, that's when she decided to convene these 4 key members on either sides of the TRIPS waiver debate, as it were, into a small, quad group, and she sort of brokered consultations at the technical and at the political levels. So what we see now is sort of an outcome of that process. And this week we got a confirmation that the leaked text, or what is also informally referred as the quad text, the leaked text actually has not been agreed to between these 4 members. We understand that at an informal General Council meeting of the WTO this week, South Africa is understood to have said that they are assessing the text internally. It's not clear, what is the level of consultations within the Indian government on this yet. And we also know that the US is not particularly keen at this point to lend its name to the text. But it does appear that it's some form of agreement within European Union member states. So be that as it may, there's a little bit of context to the leak that happened 2 weeks ago. Why did it happen, and the timing and all of that. Some believe that it is to discredit the co-sponsors, and to sort of build pressure on the co-sponsors to actually sign on this version of the leaked text. But a lot of it is speculation and conversation in Geneva. I think you must remember that early on in late December, early Jan this year, India had proposed a one-day virtual ministerial meeting to discuss the waiver. And at that point, that proposal didn't fly. And the reason for that was, other WTO members wanted to link the TRIPS waiver discussions to other deliverables at the WTO, including on fisheries and agriculture. These kinds of quid pro quos are common in WTO. So that didn't happen. But those same motivations continue. We now also have a date of the next ministerial conference in June in Geneva. That sort of sets a kind of a deadline for these discussions to resolve, particularly a clear outcome on the TRIPS waiver. But we also know there are other motivations over and above the need for a waiver. I think politically it is very important for the DG to actually deliver on this. So there's that. There has been a fair amount of criticism, about this quad process, that it's not transparent, and people actually questioning it. Is this normal for WTO and so on? In the WTO scheme of things, there's something called as the green room discussions, where a number of members are brought together and sort of more difficult conversations take place, and you try to sort of broker solutions. But observers say this is not even like a green room process, because there are literally only 4 members, and it was quite non-transparent and continues to be. So it is in this backdrop that there is pressure building within the WTO to bring this leaked text to the wider WTO membership. It's anyone's guess why this process is taking so long. Some believe that there are these small group discussions happening. Technically, everyone has access to the leaked text. Countries are discussing this. The idea is that let countries sort of let off some of the steam in small group discussions, and then you bring it to the TRIPS Council. So that's sort of the setting on how it's shaping up. And there are a number of other factors at the WTO that can potentially influence these discussions. The Ukrainian crisis and the isolation of Russia at the WTO has upset a number of different calculations, as it were. Some developed countries raise questions on the need for discussing the TRIPS waiver while there is a war in Europe, and so on. And there is sort of an emerging alliance between the BRICS countries to ensure that this kind of isolation of one member at the WTO is not, set as a precedent. So I think the Ukrainian crisis has really also complicated these discussions around the ministerial conference, and certainly for the waiver. Going forward, potentially what could happen, I see that obviously civil society in India and elsewhere is, exerting a lot of pressure on countries to not accept this version of the text. But we also know that the communique is pretty clear from the US and the EU that, that this is, a take it or leave it proposal. So there will be repercussions if countries move away from this kind of a solution. And we also do sense there is a fair amount of fatigue among diplomats. That is not to say that countries should agree on a bad outcome, but these are sort of realities. I think going forward, there could be two ways this could resolve. One is that countries accept it, accept this version of the text, and live with what a lot of scholars and activists have said is a bad outcome, and worse, might set a precedence, particularly if a waiver on related to therapeutics ever sees the light of the day. So that's one. And the second is if countries actually choose to walk away from this. And as someone pointed out to me this morning, actually, that the TRIPS waiver discussions are an open agenda on the TRIPS Council of the TRIPS Council, on the agenda of the TRIPS Council. Therefore, you can take more time to discuss this than to settle for a bad outcome. Nothing stops countries from actually walking away from this version of the leaked text and sort of challenging it. I'm not sure how much latitude South Africa and India as co-sponsors to the proposal have in this regard, because although it now emerges that there's no agreement on the Quad text, but at some level, there was some kind of political support to this version of the leaked text. I think, given that this is, a multilateral solution sought at an institution such as the WTO, it also falls it's also the responsibility of the 62 other co-sponsors to challenge this text and to take it forward. So it really depends on the kind of momentum that we have seen, across developing and even some developed countries towards the TRIPS waiver, whether this can actually be used to sort of challenge the status quo as it has now emerged. The only other thing I would like to add as to the process of these discussions, a fair number of people are worried about what this will mean if South Africa and India sign off on this. In the event they do, what that will mean for future developing country unity in Geneva and at the WTO, what this will mean for alliances between developing countries. one can argue that by letting South Africa and India negotiate this on behalf of other co-sponsors, whether that was sort of a strategic error in the sense that they did have the confidence and the vote of other co-sponsors to take this forward. But we also know that within the TRIPS Council, discussions were basically stuck at the technical level. And at some point in December 2021, in the run-up to December 2021, a decision was made that they will elevate these discussions to the political level in order to achieve a breakthrough. It's anyone's guess how these alliances will be affected. For this is really not only about COVID-19 or only about the specific waiver that we are talking about, but it's much beyond that, as has been pointed out by many activists, what it means for the access to medicines movement, and more immediately also at the WHO, in the ongoing discussions towards the pandemic treaty, where many developing countries believe that you need to have waiver-like characteristics that should kick in the minute we have a public health emergency of international concern. I mean, this could be a pipe dream considering the kind of opposition we have run up against. But these are some of the repercussions. I think whether the leaked text as it now stands is completely useless. I leave it for the experts to decide. But I think it has, in my limited observation, has moved the needle on some of these conversations. So what civil society folks and others in Geneva are suggesting is that this leaked text should now be brought as a facilitator text by the DG of the WTO, and then take it to the wider WTO membership. And then you decide. You'll have the UK and Switzerland and others and so on, challenge it. And you also have you'll also have potentially Egypt, Bangladesh, and other manufacturing hubs sort of also putting their weight on the matter. So we'll see how this goes. I think given that the ministerial is less than 3 months away, it is difficult to expect that they're going to open up the entire renegotiation of this proposal. It'll be interesting to watch if that happens, but there isn't a lot of time left, given especially if they do want to sort of resolve, come to a resolution of the TRIPS waiver proposal by that time. Thanks so much. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Preeti. This was very, very useful to know how the negotiations are moving and how the leaked text has been taken in Geneva. So next, I would like to invite Angela Taneja from People's Vaccine Alliance, and she's the head of Oxfam India. But just before, and Angela has a presentation, but before that, to all the attendees, I would like to inform that they can put their questions in the Q&A. You can see it on your screen down there if you are on the computer on your right-hand side. You can put it there, and otherwise you can also, I think, raise your hand, and then we can take the questions. Angela, and kindly present.
And you can hear me, right?
Yes, loud and clear.
So, a lot of the advantage of being the last speaker is a lot of territory has been covered, but let's the downside of having a slide deck is then one is tempted to go through it. So fundamentally, what's the problem? The problem is the fact until now, as far as vaccine access is concerned, it's a few, as you can make out, rich countries who have had a disproportionately procured the largest number of vaccine doses. Unsurprisingly, therefore, it is those from the relatively better off countries who have been able to get themselves vaccinated in terms of the full cycle of 2 vaccines. Sure, we may be now lower middle income countries, And so therefore, we're doing not too badly, but look at the status of low-income countries, poorer countries. If you compare them against the richer countries, it's 7 times more people have been vaccinated on average in richer countries than in the poor countries. If you look at the map, it's what's critical to note is these low income and lower middle income countries are the ones with the largest populations. Therefore, if you look at the vaccine map, that's how it looks. A substantial large populations have remained unvaccinated, whereas richer countries have with small populations have been hoarding vaccines. And as if things were not bad enough, we now have booster doses that are bubbling up in the richer countries and creating further tapping into the limited production capacities of vaccines. And by middle of this year, the target for the world was to be fully vaccinated. Hey, it will be 2025 by the time poor countries will be able to vaccinate as much as half of their population. Why is that a problem? Last year, 2/3 of epidemiologists said that it will take a year before mutations would render existing vaccines ineffective. Hey, lots of people again said at that time, this scaremongering. But reality is, at the time of Omicron, people were started seriously asking whether Omicron is a result of vaccine apartheid. And in case we're thinking that Omicron is over, therefore the COVID is over, some of today's headlines across the world, the pandemic is far from being over. Why am I flagging it? And people's lives have been lost, economies have been damaged, and will continue to be damaged with these countries that have vaccinated most of their people. For them, the economies have unopened and life has come back to normal, whereas life remains far from being normal for the majority of the world. Point that I'm making, and of course, point that I'm making is unless everyone is safe, no one is safe. Other variants will continue to come up until and unless we have adequate vaccines, and that in a lot of ways is a function of ensuring adequate production of vaccines. And India has its own great that we have had a large number of people vaccinated, but when it comes down to it, if as a proportion of our population, we still are the deepest of dark reds in terms of the words where people's unvaccinated people are. And if you even go further into states and then subsequently to districts, we are nowhere near ensuring all our own citizens are safe from COVID. Why are we talking about this? Because productions have to happen somewhere, supply has to come from somewhere, and therefore the fact that you needed an IP waiver to ramp up production is a critical constituent of any process to ensuring addressing shortages of available vaccines. The pharma companies say we have worked hard and therefore we need to be rewarded. Can't help resist flagging that most of them have been publicly subsidized, as this slide shows, and it is the bigger companies that have received public funding. So therefore, the whole argument of we have worked hard and therefore we need to be rewarded and we're doing something secret and etc. It's ultimately public money that has funded the wealth of pharma companies. And in our case, we've had our own share of our pandemic billionaires with Serum Institute, with not being such a terrible track record compared to other vaccines, but in terms of cost, but still has managed to make itself the most profitable large company in India at this point in time. So we have talked about the leadership. We have talked about the fact that it is India has been talking about wanting to be a Vishwaguru at this point in the global politics. Here is one space where India has genuinely been playing a constructive leadership role on the global space. I hope that India will not succumb to pressure from the EU and the US, which seem to be browbeating India into accepting a substandard agreement. And probably this is one space where, with all humility, one would say, our government in its initial position needs our support. For that to happen, we have been, as a sector, somewhat heavily focused on our domestic vaccine issues. One understands that the distribution of vaccines domestically is critical, but at this point in time, a bigger game is in town. And again, the word, and I literally mean the word, because there are over 100 countries who are supporting India, are looking to us as a nation for leadership. And therefore, in a substantial degree, given it's an India and South Africa proposal, there's an expectation from civil society in India to convince our government to continue showing the backbone that it did. So therefore, it's essential to come together, and it's only when a lot of stakeholders come together that success happens. I don't want to go into too much of detail about the People's Vaccine Alliance, but fundamentally at the global level, what the reason why it has worked in whatever way it has worked is because it was able to bring together a lot of actors. Therefore, I hope when any effort towards bringing change in India will again need to bring together everyone. We have done some work in the past, largely around as a people, because I've been asked to talk about what PVA has done in India so far. So therefore, we have done some policy work around the question of vaccination. We have done one sign-on letter to the government asking for more equitable vaccines. We have done a survey of experiences of people with vaccination. And we returned last week with again an appeal to the government to ensure that we truly have an IP waiver of the kind that it was originally envisaged. What we want is basically simple things. The framework needs to include therapeutics and diagnostics. It should include all forms of IP. It should not have any geographic barriers. It should be a simplified procedure and not complicate the process any further. Therefore, what do we want collectively now, and why in a lot of ways, why this webinar? We need to continue the push for a true IP waiver and a true people's vaccine, not allowing India to compromise under EU and US pressure. And if it is truly serious about a true IP waiver, begin its own rollout domestically. And if one is serious about curbing trade secrecy and etc., address pandemic profiteering, both pharma sector and hospitals. We've had enough of pandemic pharma billionaires. It's time to ensure people's opinions and people's needs begin to truly matter. And it's time for a true people's vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, and pointing out that why TRIPS waiver is going to be very important. Yeah. So maybe we can open the session for question and answers. So the first question that Gargya has put in the chat So where he is asking about, and the question is to Lena. So what is the impact of leaving out China? Because that is what the leaked text says in a sense. And does it mean that therapeutics will be considered in 6 months? So will India also be excluded going by that logic? And what would be the impact in that case?
So if you look at para 1 and footnote 1 of the draft text that's been leaked, and it basically says that, any developing country that has exported less than 10% of the world's export of the COVID-19 vaccines in 2021 is sort of eligible to benefit from the current solution. Now, what I wanted to simply say is this, that I think it's very important to note that China is a key manufacturing country and has played a very important role in the past and will continue to play a very important role in vaccines and drugs in the future. So, normally when we look for solutions at the World Trade Organization, it includes all member states. So I think any exclusion of any country on specific eligibility criteria is not a precedent that is actually useful. And I think member countries should be particularly concerned about such exclusions. That is one. And number two is this, that I think we need to separate the issue. India is not going to be not excluded in this draft text. It's very clear India is included. But I think on the issue of therapeutics, it's very clear that the US in particular has been dragging its feet on the inclusion of therapeutics. And perhaps it also realizes that countries with manufacturing capacity pose a real, competition challenge for its own pharmaceutical corporations. And in that sense, India should be very aware that, perhaps on this issue, India would be useful to keep Indian position independent of the US position and push for the inclusion of therapeutics. There's a window of opportunity for countries to now, ask for certain things. And this is by no means a done deal. In my past, I've been part of many, many negotiations, and I can tell you, RCEP is a clear example where we thought that India was going to sign the RCEP agreement, and it did not. So I think it's very important to recognize that actually negotiations go down the wire. There's still space for member countries to stand up and ask for specific amendments to the text, or even of the inclusion of the waiver language, if they so seek to do so. So I think it's really very important to, at this point of time, to remember this. And I think on therapeutics, it's very, very clear. This is, at this particular time, as much as people talk about the monopolies on vaccines and the fact that, vaccine supply has been dominated by high income countries, the same trajectory is being followed for therapeutics. And we need to start talking about it more, because some of us, all of us, I think in India have lived through the Delta wave. We have seen the scramble in a way for drugs for severe patients who have been hospitalized. And I think it's part of the responsibility as people who've lived through the Delta wave to speak about those situations and to talk about the right of people who need access to these life-saving drugs. And in that sense, I would say strongly sort of plead with member countries to not leave out therapeutics and diagnostics. And I think the negotiations should go down the wire, as they have many times in the past in our experience as MSF. And we will continue to ask member countries to stand up and do more about the text. So I'm going to stop here.
Two other things. One is India 10%. Let's not forget the reason why we are below 10% is because after the second wave, India stopped exports, so which have started to pick up. So therefore, it in a lot of ways provides a disincentive for manufacturers who may actually generally have capacity to start manufacturing. The other part of, therefore, whether how close would India be to the 10% cap next year, only time will show. Second part of it is, since it's developing countries, there's also manufacturing capacity including companies that have been saying they want to do they are standing by to start manufacturing. In, say, for example, in Canada, therefore those capacities are also an issue. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Actually, I would request the speakers to put their cameras on, maybe because we have more questions that are coming and everyone can respond. There is a question from the participants, Anil Sharma. So maybe can we, I want to ask the organizers, can we unmute Anil and can ask the question?
We can type.
Yeah, I will just, okay, I'll just. Anil, maybe you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And my question is, in fact, is a three questions together. The very
Can you
first.
introduce yourself first? Could you please introduce, Sunny?
Pardon?
Can you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, I am Anil Sharma. I am with the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. So my first question is, what happens if even in this forthcoming MC, no decision is taken on this? What is the way forward? And in the way forward, how are we looking at CTAP? Because that is also being seen as an alternative to that. So I am not very sure what is the status now. As far as I know, that some 40 countries have already endorsed that, but it requires more countries to do that. And the third one, the third question is, I read somewhere there is another interesting proposition which has been in the offing, is that hybrid of standard essential patents and compulsory licensing. Is it workable? These were the three questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think any of the speakers can take the question up.
So just to say that, you know, what we are faced with is not just as far off as MC12 and Mr. Sharma. I think the deals will be brokered now. You know, the text will be presented to other member states, and it's highly important that, you know, the elements that people want to restructure about the text are known to everybody and known to member states. So I think, you know, by the time MC12 comes, you will probably have some kind of done deal. I think this is actually the really burning issue, and I think the critical problem that we have today. And I will link it to a lack of transparency as well. In the past, you know, negotiations at the WTO, several rounds, you know, member states have been all there. You know, many civil society organizations have been there. In COVID, of course, you know, civil societies had very limited access. And as you can see, the only way we discover what the deal is or the leak text is through a leak. And I think in that sense, the complete lack of transparency or the limited transparency that we are seeing is one of the reasons why you know, countries or regions like the European Union have capitalized on it, because there would have been far tougher negotiations if we had a non-pandemic situation and negotiations at the World Trade Organization. I would also like to draw your attention, Mr. Sharma, to a very interesting proposal that the Lancet has published upon about carving out health from the TRIPS agreement. And I think that's a proposal that we should really be looking at in the future. And it's a very important issue, because I think it is not just about a pandemic. I think solutions that we are looking at in the pandemic, we should be talking about the solutions that have been developed for pandemic should be applicable to all global health and public health challenges. And I think this is something that we really need to start discussing about what we really need going forward. And I think the waiver has been, congratulations to India and South Africa, whatever did or did not achieve, they definitely put something that has, you know, opened up a massive debate. And I would say kudos to the governments who put their might behind it for almost 2 years. And in that sense, they need to be congratulated and recognized for the role that they have played. And lastly, I would like to say is this, that really very disappointing, as Angela has mentioned, that, you know, people are taking generics and vaccines manufactured in India for granted. We can tell you this, that, you know, Indian civil society should be playing the front runner role in these negotiations, you know, and that's, as a person who's worked 20 years, it's heartbreaking. We were there when we marched with people in with HIV, 5,000 people in the capital, when the EU negotiations were happening, because it impacted the rest of the world. We don't see that kind of mobilization in Indian civil society, and it's absolutely unfortunate. Perhaps Indians have a privileged access to vaccines and drugs, and perhaps this is the reason we don't see the kind of action that we should from Indian civil society, academics, experts, and of course, community-based organizations.
If I can just add to what Leena has said, you know, the MC12 is going to be important, but there are, you know, chances that it may not happen for a variety of reasons. You know, things are unpredictable, not only with the pandemic, but also, you know, because of the war in Europe. And I think that the distinction to be made is that any potential decision associated with the TRIPS waiver can also be approved by the General Council. So to that extent, it really does not, it's not strictly linked to the MC. And the second thing, it's actually a bone of, let's say, a sort of a negotiation tactic also, that some, apparently some developed countries have sort of suggested that even if we don't have the MC, other deliverables at the WTO can also be brought, you know, to be sort of considered by the General Council, just like the TRIPS waiver proposal. So that's something to keep in mind. Just adding on the CTAP, CTAP is a good initiative, but it has not achieved a lot of traction. 40 countries have signed up to it, and I don't think India has signed up to it. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yes, in principle, it's a good initiative. That is actually something countries like the UK have brought up in their discussions around the waiver, that we have CTAP. Why do we need the waiver, kind of a thing? So it has potential, but so far, you know, it has not really taken off for the moment.
Thank you both. Yeah, before I ask others to speak, we have a poll, and just wanted to tell the participants, and we'll just start the poll, and you can respond to it. So Pratibha, we can do that. Do you want to say something about the poll, Pratibha, maybe? And then we can continue with our speakers. It's just a feedback poll. So as people respond to it, maybe we can take what our speakers have to say. Yeah, Dr. Dhar, I can see your hand.
Yeah. Thank you, Jyotsna. You know, I wanted to say a few things about Mr. Sharma's queries about the way forward, and I expected Preeti to say that, and she said it, but I just wanted to reiterate what she had said initially, that what could actually happen, and this has happened many a time in the WTO, that this waiver, I would say this is a non-proposal which is on the table, is can be used as a trade-off, and that's the most serious challenge that we have. Now, India is particularly vulnerable at this point in time. India is actually facing a lot of flack on agriculture, for instance. On fisheries subsidies, we are fighting with the backs to a wall, and that's where I think I get most alarmed when I see this kind of a thing on the table. Anything could happen. So when the MC12, whether it happens or not, what is going to be happening through the back channels is anyone's guess. And I won't be as optimistic about you know, these negotiations ultimately moving in the direction that we want, as Leena was mentioning about RCEP. Now, Leena, don't forget that RCEP came on the back of tremendous opposition by a lot of industries here. It wouldn't have happened just like that. And let us also not forget, you know, having seen the decades of this game being played out, the Doha Declaration happened because of civil society pressure. It was tremendous pressure here, elsewhere, and we could mobilize all our resources, and we could do that. Not to of course speak of the vulnerability that the US had after 9/11. So all these actually sort of got packed up, and then we got the Doha outcome. So the short point that I would make is that that we aren't seeing the kind of opposition to the non-solution that we should have actually had. And I agree with Leena that the kind of voices we used to hear, collective voices that we used to hear, and we were able to pepper the public domain with all the kinds of pressure that we could bring in. Now all that is actually gone. I don't know why. If at this point we don't stand up and really ask for our rights, and we just allow the pharma companies to protect their rights, it is going to be a travesty actually. Nothing short of that. So we need to do more. Now, Mr. Sharma's point about CTAP. Look, CTAP is an add-on. CTAP is not a substitute for waiver. And let us not, get ourselves into these kinds of directions, thinking something else is going to happen. This was something that we had proposed, and there was, again, I would really like to thank the government of India for having done this and taken a very important step, to address this problem of access, and access in a comprehensive sense. All the problems that we saw in the context of COVID, we saw shortages right across, from medicines to diagnostics to equipment, everything we saw. We saw in short supply, and therefore, after having taken such an important step, it'll be extremely disappointing if we start backtracking for whatever reason. And I think it's our right as citizens of this country to ask the government what went wrong, what went between sort of May 21 when we proposed a revised proposal, which actually strengthened the original proposal, and then and March 2022, a span of less than just about sort of 9 months, where we are seeing a kind of a dead end. Yeah. And it is extremely important for us, and I would suggest from that this platform actually has a sign-on letter, and sort of request the government to be more transparent about what is going on in Geneva. The other point that Mr. Sharma made, I think whoever is talking about standard essential patents and compulsory license, I think has its links only to the corporate sector. Whoever has seen the standard essential patents work or not work would not actually like to link the standard essential patents with compulsory license. I don't know who did it, and whoever has done it, I think you should ask that person whether where this person is coming from. So I think this, the way forward is extremely important, and I think this group should put all its effort in the next few months. We don't know whether the MC is going to be held or not. Let's assume it's going to be held. We won't move with that assumption and put all our efforts that we can to see that there is no compromise no compromise takes place in these back rooms, the green rooms or whatever rooms they are. It doesn't happen in that way. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Dhar, and thank you other speakers also. Yeah, I think so. From JSA, we have been sort of participating in these discussions and all from the beginning, and have been part of civil society mobilizations from early on, and would also like to take this issue forward as PHM Global. People's Health Movement, there has been a lot of movement on this from our side, so that we would continue to do. And yes, that is true that we need to up our advocacy in India on this particular topic. There's no doubt about it. So I can see that many attendees are leaving now, and so maybe very quickly, if Angela and Preeti, they want to speak something. And I would also request, I think the questions that have come in the chat, there's no question in, if the speakers can have a look, I think most of them have been covered by now. So, but if there's something to be added, they can. So while they
Just a
look
quick one,
at,
just a quick one on CTAP. The reason why, in a lot of ways, the status of CTAP is precisely why we need a waiver. Yes, it's been created a couple of years back on the initiative of Costa Rica, but reality is since then, the technology holders have themselves have been ignoring it. So therefore, an IP pool is only as good as the number of the quantum of IP that gets pooled. So therefore, by definition, the status of the CTAP is a classic example of why we actually need an IP waiver and not rely on such initiatives, because they don't offer a solution.
thank you, Angela. Preeti, yeah, maybe quickly.
Yeah, just wanted to add, on the question of transparency, what's interesting to note is a lot of Geneva-based diplomats for some of the countries were actually shut out from the discussions in the Quad process, and that is a problem in itself. And what kind of precedent does that lay for future negotiations? How do you actually move trade diplomacy activities if your Geneva diplomats are shut out from this process? That's something to keep in mind. That contributed to a lot of lack of transparency. I think there was a question on China. On China, I think it's unclear, but some have suggested that China is protective about the IP around its vaccine, so it may not mind being shut out of the waiver, but we don't know what the Chinese position is. On therapeutics, I share Lina's optimism, but some diplomats here have been indicating that we might as well forget about any the fact that they have put it off for 6 months. The chances of therapeutics being discussed looks bleak at the moment, and this is something which has been the American position. I hope we are proven wrong in the coming weeks. Yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to add.
So there are many questions which are talking about the impact on India, and those questions are from various aspects. So maybe if one of you can take up this question and we can talk how it will impact from patients' perspective as well as manufacturers' perspective.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be very blunt about it. Indian vaccine manufacturers have laughed all the way to the bank, particularly the Serum Institute. So I don't think so. It's about vaccine manufacturers. They specifically have their own deals with Big Pharma, and they sort of, have been impacted by that. And so what I wanted to highlight is this, that what is going to be really impacted is India's role as a global player, as a supplier. And already India has been hit by this perception that India stopped supplies of vaccines, and that has sort of, I think very rightly so spurred a debate about local and regional manufacturer, that, we need more suppliers. It's not just a high income country hoarding that has led to very important decisions being made in Africa about local and regional production. So I think India has to realize that, if it's outside of the pandemic as well, if it has to survive as a supplier and compete with Bangladesh and the others, the current opposition to compulsory licensing, the current pro-patent, pro-IP regime with no balance or with competition is going to impact it in the next decade very quickly. I think we are already seeing many players being more interested in Bangladesh than in India in the next decade or so. So I think India has lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, with what happened, and no one actually blames India, but it's sort of been a reality check for everybody that we need to have our own production. And if India doesn't do more about therapeutic supply, more generally, even beyond COVID, you will see a greater sort of movement towards perhaps we can do this ourselves. We shouldn't be relying on India alone. And I think India hasn't played up to its slogan of saying we are the pharmacy of the world. So I think in that sense, India is in a particularly, as I say, vulnerable position as a global player on health.
Thank you.
Dr. Dhar? I just want to make one point, on this whole issue of, I in fact, forgot mentioning this in my presentation, but about this export restriction, I think someone brought it up. But the point is that, we have to look at the larger picture, because the export restriction actually also should have rung alarm bells for the Indian industry. Because in the Indian industry, if you look at the major companies, the largest companies, a substantial part of their production is actually in the foreign markets. If this is to happen, this kind of a restriction is to happen, like they have put in the compulsory licensing, the proposal. Who knows, tomorrow there are going to be restrictions coming on export of medicine generally, being imposed all over the place. So I was very surprised that this issue hadn't actually got more attention. I also missed it. But I think there are alarm bells, the plethora of alarm bells that are there all around the place for us to take note of. So India's, this pride of place as a pharmacy of the world, supplying to the other countries, while not, or the other flip side, of course, was that not supplying enough to the Indian market and supplying to the foreign market. That also is a reality that we are all facing. But all this in the context of the proposal that is on the table, I see that we should see the alarm bells ring.
Yeah, I just had one point to make, and it's a brilliant discussion to have actually about India. So I'm going to use that opportunity to open up the discussion. I think India's policies have been very interesting. India doesn't have a policy on donations, for example. Industry has used that policy gap. So accepting donations it creates a conflict of interest. You do away with the tendering system. You procure from one supplier. There's no transparency about the donation and so on. If you look at India's first application on COVID-19 therapies and the compulsory license on it, which is baricitinib, and it was quickly killed off with a donation that Eli Lilly offered to the Indian government. Now, if India continues down this trajectory of just looking at drug donations as a solution, or vaccine donations as a solution for its own problems, as I said, I would say that India's role as the pharmacy is going to be heavily undermined. So I think I would say that we have some serious work within the ministries to look at how drug donations are being employed by the industry to sort of undermine some policy responses from India. And today baricitinib not a single pill can be exported out of India, even though you have multiple manufacturers who meet the quality requirements of stringent regulatory authorities, a big plus for India. But that's not going to happen because Eli Lilly has put in a very strategic drug donation to the Indian government. Similarly, you see that in other cases. We see a US pharmaceutical corporation block import from Bangladesh of remdesivir. Block registration of oral remdesivir based on a letter to the Indian CDSCO. So the pharma industry is very strong. They have been lobbying very strongly in India. They are very, very strong because the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, the IDMA, developing country manufacturer associations are absolutely too weak to have a clear, coherent policy and with the Indian government. So I think it speaks to the weakness of the Indian industry, who hasn't been able to ring fence and put up a position on the waiver at all, or any of those issues at all. So I would actually say this, that India is absolutely at its most vulnerable at this point if some course correction is not taken at this particular point. I have 2 decades of work, experience in pharmaceuticals, and I would say this, that if pharma lobbying is not addressed at this point in the capital, in New Delhi, I think both by civil society and other stakeholders, we will pretty much see the architect of the safeguards in the Indian patent law destroyed in the next decade.
Thank you. Very interesting discussion, of course. I will just take the last question by Rupali, and I think this is the most basic and the most important question, that do you think the TRIPS waiver, including therapeutics, will be approved in time and be of relevance in bringing therapies for developing countries during the pandemic? I think, yeah, the delay that has happened, the question just hits on that. So what would you say? I would say it has been a frustrating journey here, for us all.
You covered patents, right, in this proposal, in this leak text. So if you cover patents, why don't you cover therapeutics? It's a no-brainer for any lawyer, any negotiator, isn't it? Patents, you can, manufacturers in Egypt, in Bangladesh, in India can do a lot with a patent waiver. You don't have the same kind of hurdles that you would have for biologicals and vaccines. So, why are we even asking these questions? It's a no-brainer. If you are willing to do something about patent barriers, you should be willing to include therapeutics in it. And I think this is the time to do it, because this is the time, for example, ACT-A is looking to, help countries procure these drugs. So, 6 months it's already been quite late. 6 months is even later than that, and there's no guarantee that this will happen. We've seen how brilliant the European Union has been in dragging on the negotiations, with the US as a silent watcher on all of these issues. So I think we have very little faith that, in 6 months, therapeutics would be covered. We want therapeutics now, I would say, and I'm absolutely, as a person who's watched people die in the Delta wave, I don't see any reason why we should put therapeutics at a lower level in the health system than the vaccines. I do not accept this deal if therapeutics are not included at this point of time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Lena, the Americans had made it very clear last year that therapeutics are not on, medicines are not on. It's only about vaccines. So I think the deal was done last year, as far as US and EU are concerned. The unfortunate part is that we have gone and joined them, and now we have endorsed, endorsed their position. Yeah, one member didn't want the waiver. The other one actually didn't want anything other than vaccines, and we have actually gone and joined them. So that's the tragic reality of the whole waiver proposal. So therapeutics is out, by all means, is not there.
Yeah. So I guess, maybe, it is time to conclude the webinar, and if there are no pressing questions or pressing remarks from the speakers, and just when this delay has the kind of frustration it has caused, and what worse do we want to see, or do the governments or the pharma companies or anyone who wants to see to ensure that everybody has access to the essential technologies to deal with a crisis of this order? And it is really sad that we have not been able to have the TRIPS waiver till now. It has been delayed by 18 months already. And the worst part is that if you do not have therapeutics and diagnostics, so the countries and people who could not be vaccinated, they could not be vaccinated because of lack of access. And then they will not have access to the therapeutics and diagnostics which can treat them. So it is like double, triple whammy for some of the populations of the world. And I think if we delay it further, the leaked text, of course, is absolutely unacceptable. It is like no deal is better than a deal situation. But if we delay it further, we're just being anti-poor and anti-developing countries, to say the least. And this hopefully will not happen. And we have to put up our fight more strongly as civil society towards that end. And that's what I would say, that as Indian civil society, let us come together more, and we can, let's try to work more on this. So I think that is all. Thanks to all the speakers, to Dr. Vishwajit, Leena, Preeti, Angela, all of you for such insightful thoughts and webinar. Thank you. And thanks to all the attendees as well for being here for the past 1.5 hours. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.